I will never forget them, because the way that story ended up, he ultimately made the right decision at the last second, and a terrible catastrophe was averted. I just will never forget them. It really illustrates how important it is to make sure that you pick somebody to speak for you if you ever can't speak for yourself.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel if you're new here. My name is Dr. Jillian Riggert, and this channel is all about supporting people as they lean into what it means to live a life true to themselves and free themselves from the expectations of society that often lead us astray. So if this content sounds like it's going to resonate with you, make sure to smash that subscribe button. Today, we're going to dive into Chapter 4 of Dr. Delia Chiaramonte's book, Coping Courageously. Coping Courageously is a heart-centered guide for navigating a loved one's illness without losing yourself. Dr. Chiaramonte is an integrative medicine and palliative care physician. You can learn more about her and her background, as well as what motivated her to write this book in this episode here. But today, we're going to dive straight into this book because it's a book that I find many people need right now. They need to hear it. They need to know that it's out there. And I am so grateful that Delia took the time to write it. So let's dive in to the table of contents to see what you can expect from the book. In part 1, it's navigate challenges and take bold action. Find flowers in the poop. You do you, boo. Manage the medical machine. Act in advance, and we'll hear more about that chapter today. Accept like a badass. Create an imperfect plan. And moving to part 2, cultivate growth and build resilience. Control what you can, face the darkness, focus on the now, use the contentment equation, fill your cup. In part 3, nurture authentic and meaningful connections, master courageous conversations, when positive is negative, flirt with forgiveness, leave a legacy, lean into love. So this book is to support people who are caring for those with serious illness, including healthcare professionals, with much information that we are often not provided in our own medical training. So now let's hear Dr. Chiaramonte read us chapter 4 of this book.
This is chapter 4. It's called Act in Advance. Thomas was a cheerful man in his late 60s with flyaway white hair and a warm smile that made it seem like we were old friends. When we met, Thomas was propped up in his hospital bed reading a newspaper and chatting with a quieter man who introduced himself as Jeremy. "Hi, Doc," Thomas said brightly. "Jeremy and I are just hanging out. Want to join us?" They had managed to create a lazy Saturday morning vibe, despite the antiseptic smells and vomit basins on the windowsill. I came to meet Thomas that day because his oncologist had requested a palliative care consult. Thomas's prostate cancer had spread, despite hormones, immunotherapy, radiation, and prayer. Despite his jolly demeanor, Thomas understood that things weren't going all that well. "How have you been holding up?" I asked him. I saw a flash of sadness in his eyes before he joked, "Better than the average bear." I validated his vibrant attitude and waited for him to share what was underneath his everything is peachy facade. After a few minutes, his face softened, he looked at Jeremy, and he audibly sighed. He shared that he hated losing his old life and his old self. He told me that he hated the fatigue most of all because he couldn't go for long walks with Jeremy like they had done every weekend for years. "And Jeremy is your..." It seemed clear to me that Jeremy held a special place in Thomas's life, and identifying sources of support and potential surrogate decision makers was a part of my job as a palliative care doctor. "My roommate," Thomas said firmly. We had a lovely chat about Thomas's work as an architect, magical trips that he and Jeremy had taken over the years, and which nurses understood his sense of humor. All my attempts to move the conversation into deeper, darker territory were met with a firm and smiling redirection. "Is there anything that's worrying you?" I asked. "Not really. Have you been to Greece? We loved Greece, didn't we, Jeremy?" he replied. I asked if he had an advance directive or had chosen anyone to make medical decisions for him if he ever couldn't make them for himself. Oh, I know. I should do that. I need to make a will too and clean out the attic and organize my pictures. I'll get to it, Doc. I promise, he said. I gave him a blank advance directive and encouraged him to fill it out before he left the hospital. He didn't. I saw Thomas a few months later when his treatment had caused a problem that landed him back in the hospital. His shine was tarnished. His big personality was muted, but it wasn't gone. Hey, Doc, he said. Great to see you again, he said sarcastically with a dramatic eye roll. It's great to see you too, I said. What's new? I guess Jeremy's getting tired of me, so he sent me back to the hospital, Thomas said with a half smile, glancing at Jeremy, who was sitting in a chair by the window, not saying a word. Jeremy looked tired. I could see that Thomas was declining, and I was concerned that he still hadn't identified a medical power of attorney. Thomas wasn't married and didn't have children, so if he lost the ability to make decisions for himself, it would legally be his two siblings who would decide what happened to him. I tried to make my questioning sound conversational, but I had an agenda. What's up with your family? I asked. Do you see them much? My brother is an a-hole, and my sister keeps trying to get me to accept Jesus, so no, I don't see them at all, he told me. Uh-oh. Thomas was a strong and independent man who liked things the way he liked them. He wasn't seeing that if he didn't complete a living will and assign a medical power of attorney, the very end of his life would be utterly out of his control. And the controllers, his a-hole brother and proselytizing sister, might not choose for him what he would choose for himself. I gave the little speech that I'd given hundreds of times. Advance directives are extremely important and everybody should have one. I have one, my husband has one, even both of my young adult daughters have one. An advance directive has two parts, a living will and a medical power of attorney. The living will part says what you would want in the future if you were near to death or weren't expected to ever wake up again. The medical power of attorney states who you would want to speak for you to the doctors if you couldn't speak for yourself. That person would make medical decisions for you if you ever couldn't make them on your own. Thomas took a deep breath and looked at Jeremy. He didn't say a word. Everyone should have an advance directive, but for Thomas, it was a palliative care emergency that he didn't have one. Although Thomas had never said so, I had a feeling that Jeremy was his person, the person he had spent his life with, sharing adventures and hardships, and the person who should be speaking for him as this chapter of Thomas's life wrapped up. Yet if Thomas didn't act, it wouldn't be Jeremy who would be deciding about breathing tubes and CPR and artificial feeding. It would be two people who shared Thomas's DNA, but not his worldview. I gave Thomas another blank advance directive and nearly begged him to fill it out before he left the hospital. He didn't. If you read the book, you'll hear the rest of the story.
Yeah, I can't wait. Thank you so much for taking the time to write this book, Dr. Chiaramonte. And if you need to grab yours, you can find it on Amazon. If you want to hear more about Dr. Chiaramonte and her motivation to write this book and some really great discussion on the important concepts that are included in this book, check out the video here. Until next time, thanks for watching.